In today's tutorial, we're going to be going over touch events and how we can trigger other things by having our character touch a certain part, for example. So in this project, we're going to be creating a cash collector that you often see in Tycoon type of games. So yeah, to get started, open up a clean project, and then we're going to add in a part. So the first thing we're going to add is a platform. And I'm going to go and add a cylinder. So the platform here is basically the thing that our character touches to trigger something, right? So I'm going to narrow that down. And then I'm going to scale it out a little just so my character can stand on it and touch it. And then with that, we have our button. And then we're going to need another thing. So, but before that, just to make it less confusing, we're going to rename this part into button. Or actually, we'll make it more descriptive. We'll call it cash collect or collect button. We'll call it collect button. And then we're going to create another part, which is going to display the number of cash that's being accrued that needs to be collected or is yet to be collected. So we're going to spawn this part here, and I'm going to drag this up a little and scale that in. And I'm going to do that, just expand it a little. And yeah, I'm going to move this a little closer to our wall right there, to our board. And now we have that. We're going to rename this as well. And we're going to call this the collector. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this on the right side. We'll call it the collector. And what we need to do is we need to add a surface UI on here so that it can display our cash number. So I'm going to go and hit this add button right here on the right side. And I'm going to add a surface GUI. And under that, I'm going to add a frame. Now, you're probably not seeing it. You might see it, you might not. But if you're not, then it's probably on another side. It's probably, see that? That frame is like right here. But we want to move it to our point of view right here. So what we can do is go to the surface GUI, go under the properties, and look for the property that says face. Currently, it's on front. So it's seeing this as the front right now. And I want to change it to the right or left or wherever. Depends on how you create your part. But now that I changed it to right, you can see that the frame is now here facing me. And now I want the frame to span across this board. And I want it to be like about half of the board too. So what I can do is go to the frame, and I'm going to go to size. And I'm going to have the X be 1. So that means it's going to span all across. And then for the Y, I want it to be half of the board. So Y means going down this way. So that's why it's half of the board. So yeah, now we have our frame. Next, we can add a text label. This will be the text that's shown that shows our cache. So I'm going to click the add button again on the frame, and I'm going to add a text label. And then on the text label, I'm going to do the same thing. I want the size to span across. So I'm going to say 1. I'll do it the other way. So I'm going to say 1 on the X, and then I'm going to say 1 for the Y this time instead of 0.5. Because it's the parent or the child of frame, 1 means it's going to span across the whole frame, not the whole surface, which is why I put 1, because it's going to, or the text label is going to fill up the frame. And we can just redo this text. Instead of saying label on the text property here, make sure text label is highlighted. Just put the number 0. So now you can see 0, and then we can adjust the size of that as well. I'm going to drag this all the way out. So yeah. And I want the text to be, or I want the background to be transparent. Just drag that up. You're still seeing the background as white because that's the background of the frame. But here's what we'll do with the frame. Go back to frame, and we're gonna click on this background color 3 property. Click on this white area, and then just set it to whatever color you want it. I'm gonna set it to a little dark like that. Yeah, or maybe a little bit lighter, like around there. And then while I'm at it, I want to adjust the color of the surface too. So, or the part right here. So go to the part, which is the collector part, and then go find the color property. And then I want to darken it a little, or change it to whatever color you want. So it looks something like that, right? And then on the text label, because our text is black, you're not seeing it. You're barely seeing it. So we need to change our text color. And we do that under the text property, text color. And I'm going to change it to something green to give it a little, pop. So now we have our number there. And now we have that. We can go and edit our button now. So go to the collect button, and then we're going to change the color. And I'm going to change it to like green or something. Yeah, like that. So now we have our button, which is going to collect the cash that's shown right here. And to increment this, we are going to need to create a script. And so under the text label, or actually no, under collector, we're going to create a script. And then we're going to, you know what? Actually, let's scrap that. Let's add it under the text label, actually. So I got rid of that script right there. And then next to the text label, I'm going to add a script. Make sure it's not a local script. And then I'm going to reference the text label. So I'm going to say local text label equals script.parent. And what I want to do is I want to have the text increment by a certain number as soon as the player enters the game. So now we have to get the players object. We're going to say players equals game.getService players. Game.getService is going to grab the game, and it's going to get this players right here, players object. And then we're going to say players dot player added, which is our event, which means when the player connects to the game, we're going to connect a function. And then we're going to say, actually, we're going to create a Boolean. And what this is going to do is whenever our Boolean is true, then it's going to generate the cash. It's going to increment up. Whenever it's false, it's not going to. So we're going to say generate cash equals false because we don't want it to generate or increment while the player is not connected. So when the player does connect, though, we're going to set generate cash equals to true. And then we're going to do a while loop. We're going to say while generate cash do. And we want to grab the text labels text, right? Text label dot text. Why? It's because if you go under text label and you go back to this text property, that's what we're grabbing. We're grabbing this value right here. We're going to say plus equals, and just give it a number. This is how much it's going to increment by. I'm going to say 50. So it's going to give me $50 every, however long. So with that said, I'm going to say wait 2 seconds. So every 2 seconds, it's going to increment by $50. And yeah, and then we're going to add in another event. We're going to say, but before that, you need to add in this player. This player argument comes from this connect event. Whenever this player added.connect event runs, that this argument gets passed in, which is the player. So it gets our current player and it says, okay, player dot character removed. So player dot character removing, and we're going to connect a function. And don't worry, we don't need any arguments for that. We're going to say generate cash equals false. So what am I doing here? I'm saying when the current player is disconnecting from the game, pause the cash collector. So it's not going to increment anymore until they re-enter the game. And to test this, we're going to hit the play button. And you can see that it's going up. 150, 200, 250, 300. And we can see that it's working. Now, we're going to create a script on this green button here that I'm standing on so that we're going to reset this value to 0 whenever we step on it. So with that being said, we're going to just collapse on this just to make it look cleaner. So collapse the collector part, and we're going to go to collect button, and we're going to create a script under it. And we're going to reference the button by saying button. We're going to create that button variable, and we're going to say script.parent and local collector, because now we want to manipulate the cash collector, right? So we have to grab this collector. So we can't say script.parent because it's not a child of that. What we need to do though is we're going to say collector equals game.workspace find first child collector. So what that does, it says game.workspace, which is this, find the first child, which is under workspace, that's named collector, and it's going to find this part right here. And then it gets stored into that collector variable. And then we, of course, need to get our player. and we're going to pass in players right there. Now to trigger a touched event, we're going to say button. So it's going to grab this button variable, right? And then we're going to say dot touched. So now when the button is touched, connect a function. And this function takes in one argument. It's called the other part, but you can name it whatever you want. And then we want to get the character from that. So we're going to say local character equals other part dot parent. So if the leg is touching it, it's going to say, what's the parent of the leg? Oh, it's the character. Then now we want to get the player. So we're going to say local player equals players get player from character. And then we're going to pass in this character into here. So this connecting, this function or method does what it says. It gets the player from the character that's passed in here. And then we're going to store that into the player variable. The next thing we need to do is make sure that it's the thing touching the button is a humanoid before we activate anything, because otherwise if it's touching the base plate, it's always going to activate. So we don't want to activate it if there's no humanoid touching it or character. So we're going to say is humanoid, which is going to be a Boolean that we get from character dot find first child humanoid. My bad. It's which is a. So find first child, which is a. This method returns a Boolean. So it's going to look for the humanoid, and if the humanoid is in the character, then it's going to return true. If there's no humanoid attached, then it's going to return false. Next, we need an if statement. We're going to say if the humanoid is the one touching, then we're going to do something, but we don't know yet, right? But for now, we're going to just set it equal to 0. Typically, you would want to, increment this on your own player and store the cash on your player leaderboard. But we haven't set that up yet. So for now, we're just going to set the cash collector to 0. So we've already created this collector variable, right? Now we're going to reference that right here. And we're going to say dot surface GUI dot frame dot text label dot text equals 0. I know it seems long, but here's how it works. The collector gets this part, right? And then it just drills down. So I'm saying dot surface GUI dot frame, which is dot surface GUI dot frame dot text label. And then from the text label, I grab the text property, which is somewhere here. Oh, wait, I'm not even clicking on it. Yeah, so it's right here under the text label. We're getting that property. And then we're going to set it to 0 so that it resets. So let's test that out and hit play. And right now it's incrementing, right? So 150, 200. And now I'm going to step on it and it's going to reset to 0. And by the way, I didn't anchor that part. So yeah, it's getting knocked over. I'm just going to go ahead and anchor these parts so it doesn't get knocked over and moved around. Go and click the checkbox next to anchored. And same thing on the collector or cash collector. I'm going to anchor that. And yeah. Now we need to make a leaderboard. So every time this resets to 0, we also need to increment our value on our leaderboard so that our character actually gets the money. What we need to do is we need to go under server script service, and we need to add a script. And then we're gonna need to say we're gonna need to grab the player, right? So we're gonna say local players equals game get service players. So you should be familiar with this now. It's grabbing all the players, and we're gonna say players dot player added dot connect function, and we're gonna use that argument, that player that's passed in. And again, to remind you, when a player gets added, it's going to detect it using this player added event. It's going to connect a function, and it passes in that player that just got connected. It's passing it in as an argument right here. You can name it whatever. You can name it P or my player or whatever, but it's the player, current player object. And then from there, you want to create a leader stats folder. So we want to create a leaderboard every time that the player connects to the game. And we're going to say local leader stats equals instance.new folder. So it's going to generate a folder so we don't have to create right in here. It's going to do that via the script. And we're going to name that leader stats by saying leader stats.name equals leader stats. And then we're going to parent that to the player. So what does that mean? That means when the player spawns, it's going to create a leader stats folder under that player. And then from then we need to create a cache column, right? So we're going to say local cache variable instance new again. This time we want to create an int value, an integer value. So that's going to be the number that gets passed in, right? And we're going to say cache.name equals cache, and cache.value equals 0. So whenever this leaderboard gets generated, it's always going to start out at 0. And then we're going to parent that to our leader stats. So now the cache value gets put under the leader stats folder, or it gets put inside the leader stats folder that's being created. And what we need to do now is rename this. Just so we know what it is, I'm going to call it like leader stats. And if we hit play, you should see that the leaderboard was created. Now we see 200, 250, 300. So if we step on this button, the cache didn't go up, right? That's because we didn't do anything yet. We didn't tell the button to add this into our cache. So we need to go back under our collect button. So this part right here, we need to go get that script that's under there. And under that, right before we reset that value to 0, we need to get the leader stats. So we're going to say local leader stats variable equals player because remember we already have our player object here, or player variable right there. We're going to say player dot leader stats, or actually we're going to say wait for child or find first child, but I'm going to say wait for child just because we're going to, sometimes it might load slower for you, sometimes it might load quicker. And we're going to say leader stats. And although sometimes this might work like player.leader stats, which is why I went for that, it's better to go with wait for child just to be safe. So player, and then it's going to wait for the leader stats to, generate into that leader stats folder or under the player. And then we're going to say leader stats dot cash dot value. So remember that we put our cash integer value inside the leader stats folder, right? Which is why we have cash. And then we're going to grab that value from that cash object that we put in there. And then we're going to say value. The value of our cash now is cash value plus, and we're going to add on this thing right here. So it's going to get the current amount that's on that surface, on that cash collector part. It's going to grab that value and it's going to add it to our leaderboard cache. And then it's going to reset this to 0. It's going to reset the surface GUI to 0. And so let's try that. All right, let's wait for our cache to go up a bit. And we're going to go and touch it. And as you can see, that cache got added to our leaderboard. And so if I do it again, now it's 450. And if I do it again, it's going to add 550. And that's basically how you create one of these cash collecting items for, your Tycoon or whatever mini game you're going to create. But that's the gist of touch and trigger events. And I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. Let me know in the comments what feedback you have and what other topics you want to see on this channel. And thank you for watching.